So, thank you for joining me. You've read the title. This is February 2026 Best Metal and Rock Releases. We've got the likes of Converge, Sylosis, Mayhem, as well as some smaller bands that I think are definitely worth checking out. This is my breakdown of what I think are the biggest releases of this month. So, without wasting any more time, let's get straight into it. Now, we're going to start things off with Mayhem, Liturgy of Death. Now, loved them or loathed them, they are one of the seminal black metal bands, and one of the bands who started it all off, really. In 40 years, I think they've released 7 albums, including Liturgy of Death, so it's quite a slow release cadence. They always want to do things slowly but surely, but some of the older stuff is absolutely unlistenable, with some of the poor production values that make you think it was recorded with a baked potato or a child's toy. So the thing that stood out to me the most with Liturgy of Death is it's a severe upgrade in the studio production, and it makes you feel that infernal atmosphere and that this hellish atmosphere. It's so much better and just a better listening experience. I've never been a big fan of Mayhem, but this sells the band really well for me. And some of the songs maybe dragged out a bit too much. Some of the riffs going for a bit too long, and maybe could be condensed a bit. But it's an impressive effort from one of the masters of the genre, really. Next up, we got Karnivool, and they're a progressive metal band from Australia. They did play Art Tangent 2025, well, they headlined the Friday night, and I caught a bit of the set. I didn't see it all, but I was quite impressed with what I saw. And In Verses is their new album, released on the 6th of February 2026. And yeah, if you're a fan of Leprous, A Perfect Circle, those kind of more melodic progressive metal bands, I'm pretty sure you'll like Carnival. It's not for me really, to be honest, but I can appreciate I can appreciate what they're going for. Again, it's recorded really well. It's a good end product. Maybe a bit too much studio polish at times, but I'd definitely recommend it again for progressive metal fans. Now, you want to talk about bands who just make up the rules as they go along and just don't want to be bound to genre categories. Ponte del Diavolo are definitely for you. One of the smaller names on this list, but I was really impressed with the genre fluid approach. They've got a kind of black metal spine, especially with those tremolo pick guitars and the blast beats here and there, but can get really slow and sludgy at times, and they can even incorporate bits of jazz and just electronic experimental music. It sounds chaotic, and it is, but they're not trying too hard to be different. They're just letting the creative juices flow, and it's amazing. And I think this chaotic approach is really personified by the vocalist. I'm not sure if she's going to do a ethereal style of vocals, growls, almost rapping like vocals at times. And I'm not sure even if it's going to come in English or a native Italian. It's you know again, it's chaotic. It's one of the curveballs of the month for me. It's an upgrade from the previous albums, the previous releases. And if you're looking for a bit of black and roll, I guess, yeah, some experimental music, definitely give Ponte del Diavolo a go. Love Is Not Enough by Converge was one of the biggest releases of the month and one of the most anticipated. Now, I've seen the band appear at the top of festival lineups, the likes of Art Tangent, Damnation as headliners, but I just never really give them a shot. So this was my chance with Love Is Not Enough. And yeah, I've always had a soft spot for bands like Hatebreed, and those with really strong hardcore punk roots, but they've added a bit of technicality and made it slightly more refined. And I think Converge have that energy as well. It feels raw and chaotic at times, but there's a bit of, especially with some of the guitars, there's definitely technicality in there. And their approach to recording and production was interesting. They spoke of how some bands just suck the life out of things. They just want things too polished, and it's not really reflective of who they are as musicians. But Converge said they wanted to do things, a lot of one takes, single takes, and if that meant things were slightly rough around the edges, so be it. It's they want to have fun in the studio as well, and I really respect that. And this feels really raw and believable, and an honest production. Really, just a really believable album. And there's some songs at the start are just like a minute and a half, 2 minutes long, and they're really fast, chaotic. No fancy introductions, and they will cause absolute carnage when they're played live. The highlight of the album is "We Were Never the Same," though. That chorus is just instantly memorable. And yeah, I can't wait for that to be played live again. That's one that's it's gonna cause carnage. Now, there aren't many black metal bands as elusive as Worm, and I'm still annoyed that they cancelled the 2024 headline show here in Manchester. It would have been their UK debut, but the release of this album does help a bit. It helps to ease that pain, well, pain, whatever. Yeah, I just love their approach to black metal. How, when you think of black metal, you think of the speed, the ferocity, the blast beats, the tremolo pick guitars, but Worm have done something very different. Their approach is more slow, methodic, and it's almost doom metal, doom and black metal mixed. In fact, the closest analogy I can think of is, Candlemass. If Candlemass decided to become a black metal band, this is what Worm would sound like. That's a pretty terrible analogy, but make of it what you will. Now, I followed Domhain for a few years. I discovered them at the end of 2023 when they released their debut EP, Nimue, and was really excited for the new album this month, just because it's different to a lot of black metal out there. There's only so many references to Satan and corpse paint bands you can watch. I really like their warmer, more post-metal approach and more experimental approach. They incorporate folk elements in the same way likes of Agalok or Seor would do. And similar to Seor, how they got two different vocals in the band in Domhain. The vocalist Andy, he's the lead vocalist and the bassist. And he's got these really fierce growls, which he doesn't use that often, but when he does, it's really impactful. And the drummer, female drummer, Anais, I believe her name is, she has this really calm, ethereal resonance to her voice, and this contrasts so nicely. And they have some really nice duets in the song, in the album rather. Yeah, it's more of a left field black metal approach, but it's one I really enjoyed, and I'd recommend it. The New Flesh by Sylosis was one of the biggest releases of this month and one of the most highly anticipated. And I've got a video that goes over this in a lot more detail, so this little section is a more truncated review, really. And yeah, I found the songwriting approach quite interesting. Josh Milton spoke of how just wanted to relive the teenage years and when they were younger and just to live in the moment and to write things that feel good in that particular moment. And I respect that approach, really. And the result is something that's very difficult to pin down on a stylistic point of view. It's a cross between metalcore and thrash, but there are definitely some curveballs in here. Some songs you would not expect Sylosis to write. Josh also spoke about how he wants songs that are big hitters, they're heavy, but they're also quite anthemic with big choruses. And I think he achieves that with some songs on this album. I'm going to keep that quite vague, so you can go and check it out for yourself. But again, expect big choruses on this album, and expect again some curveballs that you wouldn't expect Sylosis to release. If you've made it this far, thank you. I appreciate you for sticking around. We're nearly at the end now with only two more releases. First of which is Calandra and the live album, which I'm really excited to tell you about. They're a hidden gem in the world of rock and metal, really. How they incorporate these really cool folk elements in there, and I've always thought they're a live band, really. Their studio work's pretty good, but it's really live and in the flesh where they really show how brilliant musicians they are. That's personified by the vocalist Katrine, who has an absolutely amazing voice. She's just a incredible vocalist and performer. And I think this live album, really sums up the best. And I've seen a trend in the world of rock and metal lately with more and more bands releasing live albums nowadays. Maybe it's less effort for them to produce albums like this, it's more cost effective. But I think on Calandra's album, you're going to showcase them so well. But also, it gives you a bit of story behind the band and how they wrote some of these songs. That's something that you just can't get from a studio. Back in the day, you used to get those album sleeves where you could read the lyrics and some song titles. I mean, Nile, they used to do that really well, where Carl Sanders would go into a lot more detail about how he wrote these songs. And I think listening to Calandra live, you definitely get more insight into them as people and musicians. And I think that experience makes the new album worth listening to. Last but not least, we got Suffocation, Jesus Wept, The Roadrunner Years. And this isn't a new album, it's a re release from three albums they released in the early 90s, one of the first three full lengths under Roadrunner Records. And I was quite excited, thinking this is going to be the remastered material, re recorded material, especially with all the lineup changes. But no, it was exactly the same as the original recordings, which makes it feel a bit, yeah, like a cash grab almost. I don't really understand why they're doing this. Yeah, it's not really a significant milestone either. It seems a bit bizarre, really. But at the same time, I'm wondering if they're trying to introduce their music to new people, and there's a newer generation of extreme metal fans. So again, maybe it's trying to reintroduce themselves to this newer generation coming through. And I think someone like myself, I'm perhaps part of that target audience because I'm too young to remember those albums when they were released originally. And even so, I was 15 when I discovered Pierced from Within. And it's got some of my favourite songs by the band. The Brood of Hatred, that's my favourite song by Suffocation, and a very underrated classic, really, in my eyes. So yeah, it was good to relive those memories again of discovering that album and that song, but also introduced me to some stuff that maybe I'd overlooked. It's also good to see how this album stood the test of time in terms of production, but in contrast, we've seen how the genre's moved on since then, how death metal has moved on since the early 90s. But yeah, Suffocation, they're a classic. They've influenced so many extreme metal musicians, and it's easy to see why. So there we go. Those are the albums that stood out to me in February 2026. I'm pretty sure there's some I've missed, like Carpenter Brute. I've not had a chance to listen to that yet, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be great. If there's any you think I've missed, let me know. If there's any you've discovered from this list, let me know also. If you made it this far, thank you. I appreciate you, and hopefully I'll see you again.